Oh man, Sox fans already knew Jerry Reinsdorf was a terrible owner, but the Athletics' recent piece showed he is worse than you can imagine. Let's discuss next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the Athletics' Britt Ghiroli and Ken Rosenthal just put out a piece about how the White Sox have become a historic disaster under owner Jerry Reinsdorf. And I want to discuss the most revealing information in the first segment. Then let's discuss Jerry's recent attempts to impress investors and lawmakers to get a stadium. And finally, the Sox new TV network will be over the air. I want to highlight a nugget that could be a preview as to why any future owner will want to stay in Chicago with or without a new stadium. And now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, astounding, sad, tragic, humorous. Those are all the adjectives I've heard or seen to describe the Athletics piece out on how the Sox declined so rapidly to become the worst franchise in baseball this year. And the highlights I want to share shows just how much owner Jerry Reinsdorf has played a role in the team rotting into a stinking corpse of a franchise. Because that's the best way to describe the Sox at this point. They're just a stinking, rotting, dead corpse of a team. And also, before you hit send on the comment of Jerry sell the team, because I see that always a lot in the comments, and I love the YouTube comments and our YouTube community page. Before you hit send, he's not going to sell the club, as was pointed out in Rosenthal's and Ghiroli's work. Instead, as 670 The Score's Matt Spiegel described on yesterday's Spiegel and Company show, we sadly have to wait for time to expire on Jerry's life. That's sad that we have to basically hope that a person dies for things to get better. It's sad. It's tragic. It's not like a very comfortable place to be in. But that is the biggest takeaway, as the underlying theme is Jerry can support Getz's attempts to modernize the front office, but let's face it, he's probably going to sabotage it. So let's get into the highlights. First, how the article starts is wonderful. And I want to share a snippet, especially since The Athletic, is subscription based. And a lot of you probably don't want to subscribe to, probably stop subscribing to the Athletic because they no longer cover the team, except for when they're historically awful. So here's what they wrote. And yet all the factors that led to this season's disaster, when players and traveling staff try to encapsulate how things reached such a sorry state, again and again, they bring up one thing: the plane. The White Sox charter an Airbus 320, a plane first manufactured in the 1980s. It features only 8 first-class seats. The rest is coach. A majority of MLB charter teams charter bigger 757s with ample first-class seating for the players and the coaching staff. Even well-known frugal franchises such as the Tampa Bay Rays, Colorado Rockies, and Miami Marlins charter nicer planes, but not the White Sox. When a player new to Chicago first stepped on board this season, he said loudly, quote, "Come on, man, no show plane," end quote. Of course, the players burst into laughter. Last year, a tweet comparing the planes used by MLB teams caused a stir when it was shared among White Sox players while they were on board. A team plane doesn't make the errors or poor baseball decisions, but the White Sox decision to use a smaller, older plane reflects how they operate. The difference between the White Sox and other clubs is so stark. Players who leave Chicago for other teams celebrate their freedom by texting each other, quote, "This is the big leagues," end quote. End quote. They do not do the little things or big things right, end quote, said a recently departed veteran. So they did talk to about 40 former players, teams executives. Some of them did not go on the record, but they researched this very, very well. This reads like a research paper into how the Sox have declined into basically being the worst team ever. And the 2024 team will be the worst team ever because, again, of all the modern technology possible, it should be almost nearly impossible to break the 1962 New York Mets record and all for the most losses in a 162 game season, but also the 1916 Philadelphia A's record for the worst winning percentage. And I get it, first world problems. But as Britt said on Foul Territory yesterday, you should be doing the little things right. And if you refuse to do those things correctly, especially if you refuse to do the big things correctly. So these little things like, having a nice team playing does make a difference. The Rays can't and won't ever pay for a Shohei Ohtani type talent, but they can treat their 26 man like Ohtani deserves because they realize comfortable players are happy, well-performing players. And here's the snippets on Jerry that will make you hate him as the owner even more. Many of those who spoke to The Athletic, some of who requested anonymity to speak candidly about Reinsdorf and the state of the franchise, said the owner's views on the game have calcified. That while at times Reinsdorf has carried a big major league payroll, he has refused to invest in the cutting-edge amenities and infrastructure ready to succeed. Some of Chicago's wounds were self-inflicted and immediate, such as hiring Tony La Russa to manage. Others festered for years, such as the team's reluctance to adapt to analytics and a leadership structure that led to division. All can be traced back to Reinsdorf, who last season ignored pleas by others in the organization to interview outside general manager candidates and promote it internally. Instead, Reinsdorf even let popular broadcaster Jason Benetti leave because he didn't like his style. Quote, "You got a baseball fan owner who thinks he knows everything, and maybe he did in 1992, said a former employee. But the amount of info has skyrocketed in the last 30 years, and he's put his middle finger up to that," end quote. And then another quote, "As long as Jerry's philosophy is an overarching one, they won't ever succeed," end quote. So you and I have confirmation that Jerry is heavily involved in how the organization is run and that he still thinks it's 1992. I still think he thinks it's 1958 with, again, how he, pays players and cites Branch Rickey and Eddie Stanky. And why, again, even if thinking it's 1992 is scary, 1992, just remember, for those that can remember it and, the Gen Zs, sorry to mansplain here, but 1992 was still when base stealers could be just as big of superstars as power hitters. And we didn't realize that base stealing could lead to unintentional outs and power hitters could lead to instant offense. Also, you do not have the contribution of steroids. Just throwing that out there. And remember, if you do not like analytics like Jerry, that's okay. But data and analytics has found ways to simplify the game and to do things like called score enough runs to win, come up with concepts to then prevent enough runs to win, and, well, be in the best position to win. And the article confirmed his handprints are everywhere on this organization, right down to texting TV broadcasters during the broadcast about his thoughts regarding what they're saying about the team. Quote, "He's hands-on in every part of the organization," said former White Sox player and team vice president Kenny Williams of Reinsdorf. And the loyalty being his greatest strength as a person is also his greatest weakness. And that was on display as Rosenthal and Garoli described that the Sox are run like a family business. And this is what an executive with another team said, quote, "They have people there with no business being in Major League Baseball," end quote. And here's the most scathing indictment that they wrote. Here's the snippet. "The 2005 World Series win was the franchise's crowning achievement under Reinsdorf, but it also gave the organization a false sense of confidence that kept it from evolving. Reinsdorf and a certain faction of the organization felt no pressure to adapt. The personnel was so insular that multiple former employees described it as a time warp. One of the Sox most glaring failures has been the team's limited embrace of analytics. Reinsdorf, sources said, would make comments in meetings such as, quote, 'You guys know I'm not an analytics person. I'm not big into this,' end quote. He questioned at least one White Sox player about whether it was possible to have too much information." Breathe, breathe. The other reason the Sox, why is this huge data, and analytics, such a big deal? Well, Tommy Pham went on record confirming that players are usually in the wrong spot defensively. Quote, "That's a huge area I felt could be better," end quote, said outfielder Tommy Pham, who signed with the White Sox as a free agent in April and was traded in July. Quote, "They know it," end quote. Former pitchers described Chicago's game planning as almost rudimentary. Rather than provide individual plans for each hitter, the White Sox offered generalities such as "your sinker will play down in the zone," an insufficient answer against say, a lineup full of left-handed hitters who had sinkers in that area. Hitters exposed similar concern. They had information, but you didn't get an explanation or a plan. Reinsdorf did say, quote, "Analytics are very important to the game. A useful tool that complements but will never completely replace human judgment, end quote. Okay, there's nothing wrong with, hey, how's this ball coming off somebody's bat? The hard contact, just how does it sound to kind of give you an idea if you want to split hairs on a player. But data and analytics makes the game seem easier. Now, I can understand if you want to think, hey, there's just too much information. That's fine if you want to boil it down to that. But again, WAR tells you the value of a player that's going to help you win. Wins above replacement will tell you the offensive value, that type of stuff. That's why these numbers exist. And it's so comical because at one point they developed their own spin rate data, but they also used a third party and they couldn't tell the difference. There was arguments, there was dysfunction. I mean, and I talked about the issue of the dysfunction yesterday, and it just was confirmed in this piece. And, it outlined how hiring La Russa totally hijacked the Sox possibly hiring AJ Hinch, the guy who won a World Series, even though it was tainted with cheating. But he's the manager who has guided the Tigers to an improbable run to being on the doorstep of a playoff spot. And just think about how bad it is that Kenny Williams said this, quote, I don't yet have a way to talk about that period of time because it takes me to a bad place and it'll take me from being the person I aspire to be, end quote. And the most damning quote is here. A former staffer said, Jerry thinks he has all the answers, end quote. I mean, it just boggles your mind. It makes you almost seem exhausted. Like, I'm exhausted just sharing this with you. And yes, there's potential changes coming, or there is changes. The article acknowledged that they have a dedicated coach at each minor league affiliate to help with analytics. Getz is bringing in, obviously, Renaissance thinking like Brian Bannister, Josh Barfield, and Jin Wong. And again, there was, as I talked about yesterday, Brian Mailer was hired to present, changes that the team should take, basically to update the front office. But do you think Jerry's going to hijack it? I do. I'm very concerned he's going to hijack it. And again, will he ever sell? This is what he said. Reinsdorf has said he would advise his family to keep the Bulls and sell the White Sox upon his death. Quote, friends of mine have asked, why don't you sell? Why don't you get out? My answer has always been, I like what I'm doing, as bad as it is. What else would I do? I'm a boring guy, and I want to make it better before I go, end quote. And he said that last year. But for now, this is what they write. For now, as his franchise creators, Reinsdorf continues to conduct business in his preferred style, operating out of his suite, surrounded by old friends and memorabilia. Quote, the rumor was always we'll never figure it out until ownership changes, one former player said. The real thing holding it back isn't the people and the player development, it's the owner, end quote. So everything you and I thought about Jerry Reinsdorf and how he runs the club has been confirmed. It's sad, tragic, humorous, astounding, and just exhausting all at once. And as I said before, it's sad because this feels like the Blackhawks toward the end of old man Wirtz's time on Earth. And remember, things didn't get better for the Blackhawks until old man Wirtz passed away. And that's just sad that we have to hope a person has to leave this earth. Anyway, maybe Jerry's quest for a new stadium distracts him enough to let the adults run the club. Speaking of that, the Sox and the developer of the proposed land to build the stadium, the new stadium on, recently tried to impress lawmakers. And let's discuss if that got the team any closer to a new field next on Locked On White Sox. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. And whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And the White Sox start a 3-game set with the San Diego Padres tonight. The first pitch is at 8:40 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM and the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, follow or subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcasts. As Locked On White Sox is available at places such as Apple and Spotify. Again, I would love to be your audio companion if you're mowing the lawn, sitting in traffic, again, and also if you're a guy guy or gal who is checking in and out on the team, I'm here. I'm available via audio or via, video. All right. So I'm all for the White Sox building a new stadium on the vacant land in the South Loop, known as the 78, just as long as it's fully funded by Jerry Reinsdorf and other investors, or at least the cost of the taxpayers. I mean, this is just my opinion, is minimal. Like, say, covering the roads to get into the stadium, if, you got to build a, 4-lane road or whatever, or the sewer or water installation. And again, you and I, we can argue about spending of tax dollars all day long, especially if you live downstate. I get it. But infrastructure investments, in my opinion, and it's, again, just my opinion, and if I have information that I'm missing, feel free to share. But usually infrastructure investments, and I call them investments because it helps put, these blue collar workers to work, provide for their families, road workers, plumbers, steam fitters, all that stuff. So I'm always in favor of that because I want to make sure that, and again, I got a brother-in-law, he's a plumber. He actually got work when the Bears privately funded renovating Hallis Hall. Just saying, like, if you got to build things to get these people to work. So I got no problem with that if it's minimal cost, because I've also seen, for example, like the Bucks, they had a private public partnership, and that area is thriving when it used to be just sitting vacant land. But again, it was a partnership. With Jerry Reinsdorf and his proposed plan, it's not a partnership. It's him putting in minimal costs. And while there's nothing wrong with guaranteed rate field, I do propose a backup plan to develop some of those parking lots if this falls through. Yes, we'll have to give up tailgating, but would you rather give up tailgating if it meant, a little bit more revenue to potentially be sunk into the team? Although we can't trust Jerry to sink that money back into the team. But I think this new stadium would give the Sox the major exposure that they need. And it gives them that if you build it, they will come, that this team desperately needs. But this is Jerry again we're talking about, and he's not going to pay for that whole 1.9 estimated $1 billion it will take to build this new stadium. In fact, it's reported that he's only going to give a sliver of it at $200 million. I mean, what is that, a down payment on a mortgage of that size? I'm just saying, like, that's nothing. And Related Midwest and the team did attempt to get the lawmakers to agree to extend the hotel tax and debt extending under the original deal that built the rate and then later renovated Soldier Field. But thankfully, it's falling on deaf ears because they did try to impress them. The developer and the team, they put this makeshift field on the land, and I discussed it with Rob Hart a couple of weeks ago from WBBM. But they basically put this field on, and then they attempted to schmooze lawmakers. And this is what Chicago Sun-Times reporter Mitchell Armentrout wrote. The Chicago White Sox and mega developer Related Midwest put on a South Loop fantasy camp Monday in their latest pitch to state lawmakers who so far aren't swinging on public funding for a new stadium. Legislators, business leaders, and other VIPs were invited on a downtown riverboat tour that docked at the underdeveloped parcel known as the 78 near Roosevelt Road and Clark Street, where longtime Sox groundskeeper Roger Bossard has manicured a pop-up field of the team's future dreams. Attendees then got to round the bases and shag ground balls on the diamond with the White Sox greats and Hall of Famers, according to an invitation for the event, which was closed to press and billed as being meant to, quote, celebrate the spirit of America's pastime and embrace the future of Chicago's legacy, end quote. So, did it convince lawmakers to sign on? According to Chicago Tribune's Jeremy Gorner, hopefully I pronounced that right, Illinois lawmakers on Tuesday said they remain unmoved over the prospect of public funding for a new White Sox stadium a day after the team and real estate developers hosted an event that included a Chicago River cruise to the proposed site for a new ballpark. The public relations ploy by the Sox and developer Related Midwest gave the handful of legislators who attended a chance to see renderings of a ballpark on the 78 property along with the river south of Roosevelt Road and hobnob with former Sox stars Ozzie Guillen, Bo Jackson, Harold Baines, and Ron Kittle. While some lawmakers acknowledged being impressed by the presentation and the site, where team groundskeeper Roger Bossard's crew has carved out a makeshift diamond, several said they remain skeptical about the use of public money for such a project. Quote, "We said no because we all want a shiny new car," said State Rep Marcus Evans, a Democrat from Chicago South Side, who is part of House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch's leadership team. "Shiny new cars don't move me. It's all about the finance," end quote. And I love this quote from Armancourt, going back to him. Illinois lawmakers on Tuesday said they remain unmoved over the prospect of public funding for the new White Sox stadium a day after the team and real estate developers hosted an event that hosted the river cruise. The public relations ploy by the Sox and developer gave the handful of legislators a chance to see the renderings. And while some lawmakers acknowledged being impressed, oh, wait, I double quoted it. I'm sorry. I double quoted it, but basically the quote he shared was, again, more lawmakers saying, no, we're not going to pay for this. We're not going to vote for this. We're not going to fully fund it. We're not going to give you $1.7 billion of taxpayer money just so you can have your shiny new toy. And honestly, if I were investing, Jerry, and Related Midwest, I would say just give up on trying to get the taxpayers to fit the bill because it's a terrible look to ask for taxpayer money in the first place. But also when the team is 3 defeats away from tying the 1962 New York Mets, and it's already been announced to cut payroll, like I discussed a couple shows back, that's a terrible look. And I like what Sun-Times columnist Rick Morrissey wrote. Jerry Reinsdorf's franchise is headed for the modern-day era record for most losses in a major league season. Nothing else matters. A team that loses this much should have to swallow all the bad stuff that comes with it, with having the letter L stitched to their uniforms. Should have to wear it, and they should have to wear it. The focus needs to be on factors that led to this and what can be done to change the fortunes going forward. Instead, the Sox and developer-related Midwest wined and dined legislators and business leaders Monday, hoping to gain favor in the team's quest to get public funding for a new ballpark in the South Loop. Now, it's fine to distract Jerry because, as we've seen, he's so hands-on with this franchise that it's led to it becoming a rotting corpse. So I don't want him to totally not be I'd rather have him focus on the stadium and have the adults in the room. Hope we got to hope Chris gets as an adult in the room, focus on getting the club better, but he should just start looking at getting investors and private financing lined up. I mean, he used private financing to get the United Center built with the help of the Blackhawks. So maybe alter your plans and include the Chicago Fire and the Stars having their stadium also on the 78, and maybe they can help co-sign the mortgage because that's what he's looking for. He's looking for a co-signer. And the state should not be the co-signer. Okay, this isn't the late 80s anymore. This economic impact has pretty much been shown to be a boondoggle. Now, is there some impact? I would say yes, but it's not whatever, these teams say. And as I've even outlined, like you're talking about all these jobs. If I'm a lawmaker, if I got to give you $1.7 billion, I want four Fortune 500 companies signed up to have their headquarters on this land along with the stadium. Then I can say, yes, there are jobs. And also the state speaker is telling you, go find your money elsewhere. Privately, and not that if you privately fund, now I don't know how licensing and pulling permits work, but if you privately fund, you could put a shovel in the ground whenever the heck you want. And I admit, again, I'm not the most educated on this, but Related Midwest is owned by Stephen Ross. The Miami Dolphins owner, who's also worth $17 billion. How about Jerry and Steven come together and put this structure up? If this thing's been sitting vacant for decades, maybe you should put up your own money. If you build it, they will come. Now, one play Jerry will keep running is the threat of moving to another city. His recent team owned TV network made a huge announcement, though, that could give a hint as to why that would be foolish and why we should then never believe him to ever leave Chicago or even a new owner. And that I want to discuss next on Locked On White Sox. Hey, you've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, FanDuel has something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. FanDuel is excellent for futures, props, and parlays. So, if you're wanting to get some action on the Chicago Bears this Sunday, they have some really good props that I would say to take a look at. Like DJ Moore, anytime touchdown is plus 180. Let's say you want to push it a bit. They have plus 1100 that he scores in the first quarter. And $10 on that could turn into $110. Just saying. And it's also plus 1600 for DJ to score 2 or more TDs. They also have plus 350 on the Bears scoring first with a field goal and plus 230 for a TD. So like I've always said, parlays, props, futures, FanDuel is your place. Just visit FanDuel.com. Download America's #1 sports book. And again, the White Sox start a 3-game set with the San Diego Padres. The first pitch tonight is at 8:40 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all my everydayers who stick with me this long. Appreciate you. Love you. Love how we're building that community on YouTube. Again, also, if you have to do some yard work this weekend, hey, put me on your headphones. I'm available via audio on places such as Apple and Spotify. And I hope you guys have a good weekend. I don't really have a ton of plans. Although where I live, the Bear game is not going to be on locally, so I got to find a place to go watch it. The decision was to go with the Vikings instead of the Bears. Okay. I don't want to get into it. Anyways, the Sox, Bulls, and Blackhawks are attempting to walk a fine line with their new TV network that is set to launch on October 1st. Chicago Sports Network is going to go over the air that they recently announced, but the Sun-Times points out that they're trying not to upset cable and streamer carriers by doing over the air. So they're going to try to walk this very fine balance between that. But 670 The Score's Lawrence Holm points out on his House of L podcast that there's a method to this madness and why they're going to try to walk this fine line. And it's something that I found to be a hint that it would never make sense for the Chicago White Sox to ever leave Chicago. So first, here's the press release announcement from Chicago Sports Network. The Chicago Sports Network, CHSN, today announced that fans and viewers across the Chicagoland region will have access to Chicago Blackhawks, Bulls, White Sox games, and the rest of the CHSN programming via over-the-air, OTA, agreement with Millennial Telecommunications, WJYS-TV. Games for the teams will be televised on channel 62.2 and channel 62.3. Both channels will convert over to HD and carry full-time CHSN programming beginning October 1st. Having 2 digital channels enables the broadcast of games simultaneously when 2 teams are playing at the same time. Okay. Why they're doing this is discussed in some great detail on Lawrence Holmes' House of L podcast that I suggest you check out. And he highlighted what I'm about to share that came from the press release that I think is the hint of why it makes sense to do this and why, if you are Jerry or any potential new owner, you stay in Chicago despite sharing it with the Cubs. For the roughly 600,000 Chicago designated market area, DMA homes, without a pay TV service and over-the-air antenna that receives all the channels will be necessary to see the games. So all you need is some rabbit ears. And there is 600,000 homes in Chicago that don't have a streaming or cable service or satellite service. But all you got to do, hook up some rabbit ears, and boom, you're going to be able to get your Bulls, Blackhawks, and White Sox games. Now, you may need a TiVo, if they still make those, to record the game if you can't catch it live, but this is a great way to navigate cord cutting. I don't even know if TiVo records over the air, but please share in the comments. But this is a great way to navigate cord cutting, and it is a great backup plan in case Comcast puts this channel on a tiered package or just doesn't want to have this channel on any of their packages. And that is what is really scaring teams, is carriers are realizing teams are being greedy for rights fees. So in turn, the RSNs want more money from the carriers, And the viewership is just not enough for the carriers putting the RSN on the basic plans. It's just not enough outside of the games. I mean, they're going to carry stadium programming, and stadium is, bench streaming, but is it going to be enough to even threaten Fox Sports's revamped lineup? I don't know. But teams do not want to be on those higher price packages because they fear of the opt out by people who do not want to pay the price. But still, the sheer volume of even potential basic viewers is 600,000 people or 600,000 households. Nashville, the speculated best landing spot for the Sox if they were to ever move, has 1.1, basically 1.19 million television households. So Chicago alone has 50% of that with people who do not even have cable or streaming service. Think about that. Half of Chicago that doesn't have that, just has over the air, is the entire, is close to almost the entire TV household population of Nashville. And Nashville metropolitan area is 2 million. And the last data I could find for at least Chicago estimated TV homes is 3.2 million. So 3.2 million to just the entire metro area. Why would you want to drop down in class? And Chicago's metropolitan population is 9 million. And yes, I do see that Nashville is growing, but TV is still a major draw for revenue for clubs. And you got the number 3 market, Chicago, even if it's shared, versus the number 26 market. And Vivid Seats, they did some research in 2017 to the target zip codes within the city where the majority of the Sox and Cubs fans live. And yes, the Sox only had 17 of the 60 zip codes where they're the majority, but still that's 25% of the population. And remember, they researched the split. So it's not like it's just 750K that live in the city. There is minorities and percentages in each zip codes, but still they have enough fans to thrive. And if they ever put a good team on the field and built their new ballpark or developed some of the parking lots around the rate, there's a chance that they could eat into the Cubs fan base. It's always a possibility if you think big. And that's the thing. The Sox with Jerry Reinsdorf have never thought big. They've never thought we got to get a gate attraction player. And a lot of them. They've never thought about, hey, if I can't get my new stadium, you know what? The old Comiskey Park parking lot, I'm going to develop it. We'll put a parking garage. We'll still have a few parking lots for tailgating, but I'm going to create Comiskeyville. You do have the potential to make money and thrive in Chicago than, say, moving to Nashville, where the appetite for taxpayer-funded stadiums is no longer at the starving point. And I think it was Jim Margulis of Sox Machine. He was on the score at one point that said that a lot of people in Nashville just want an expansion team. And you can say, well, they'll move to Charlotte. But that's the 21st market. They'll move to Portland. That's a 23 market. They'll move to Montreal. That's a Canadian currency. These numbers show, again, why it's fine to share the market with the Cubs. Just stop thinking like your little brother. All right, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And I'll be back on Monday with a Minor League Monday report as the Farm Club seasons will wrap up this weekend. So it'll be like basically the final Minor League Monday report of the season. And feel free to leave comments about today's topics regarding the Athletics piece on Jerry Reinsdorf's terrible ownership, the team's desperate attempt to convince lawmakers to pay for a new stadium now working, and the latest on the Sox new TV network giving a hint as to why the Sox should always remain in Chicago. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I'll talk to you Monday.